So from 7 to 16, although I was very active, ice skating, gymnastics, there were things that I did find very difficult. But because I was so strong, and one of the biggest things was just the facial of being misdiagnosed with depression or the psychological. So yeah, like Don said, from that benefit, it would have been a lot easier if my friends were like, what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? Why do you, if I thought I was so sad all the time or depressed. So it would have been a lot easier where my son right now, 16, his friends know. He's in a scooter, and he's grown up with it. So this is all he knows. So he doesn't look at it as, oh, I've got this poor thing, it's not like being hit at 16 like I was, like, oh my gosh, he's grown up with it, so his friends are like, they all know. As he's progressing, they're there to support him. So there are two sides of it. I mean, for me, finding out at 16 was traumatic. For him, he's 16 and he's learning to drive, and he's like, Dawn, I want to get out there and try the next thing. So I think there are two sides too. For myself, or my 14-year-old daughter, I certainly wouldn't get a test.
Yeah, it's different when it's symptomatic or not symptomatic. If a child if there's concerns that the child is showing signs, and then it is very appropriate to be evaluated. But if the child doesn't have any signs of it, then that's when we say it's best to wait.
I think it's awesome the way you guys were able to have children. I just think that's.
Yeah, I've never heard of that. I think that's a great.
Yeah, I hope Wendy's can do that.
We were just very lucky, and it was interesting because in our experience, we went through the traditional CVS and an amnio actually, and then we did PGD, and it was only because it just, I think a month or something before we went to deliver our son, that I found out about a couple in Australia who had done the PGD. So then we, began, I think, the IVF process for the PGD, but there was, the lab was like in Canada and Holland, and so now it may have evolved some, but we doubled up on all the testing, which was more expensive, but I didn't want to take any chances.
That's wonderful.
How long has that been available?
PGD,
Girls are 6, and I think they were the first in the country, so.
Yeah, PGD has been around for maybe 10 years-ish, but FSH is one of the more trickier diseases to do for PGD because it has to be by linkage, and there's all these complicating factors, so you guys probably were one of the first with FSH.
So you said with the
you were
DNA,
first, yeah.
You said with the DNA, if there's more DNA, so if I have it and my son has it, would that make it easier for him to then possibly do something like that?
Yes, so I think because you are affected, they would be able to more easily establish the linkage in your family. So figure out which markers are associated with a deleted chromosome. Whereas if you didn't have it, if there weren't any affected relatives, it would be much more difficult. And the technology is going to get better. So by the time your son's old enough to want to have children, there might be more options and easier options available.
Is it harder if they're more progressed to get the better?
No. The DNA always stays the same. Yeah, so it can be done regardless of severity or course.
And I remember they had to do, it was very bizarre because normally with IVF you're dealing with infertility first, and Wendy that wasn't a problem, she could like that. So it was more an issue of testing and fertilizing the embryo, and then having that healthy embryo, and then extracting the cells, and in some cases multiple cells from the same embryo, and then having that embryo survive the process of extraction, combined with making sure that it came out negative. And then, of course, then getting lucky enough to hang on to that embryo and then having to implant it and making sure that the implantation process actually was successful. So it was a series of hoops, but it was certainly a lot more it was a much better option than the roll of the dice with our son, which was a 50-50 scenario.
Yeah.
So you did it with your two
We did the
children,
PhD with
not
our
the
twins.
first one?
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
I've told my cousins that if anybody's tripping over their feet and doesn't know why, give me a call, I can save you $2,000. And a lot of aggravation. I, of course, went through years of making excuses for not mountain climbing because, you know, I was just feeling overweight and out of shape. I wasn't overweight and out of shape. I had FSH. And so I'm adamantly against testing kids who show no symptoms. I would say when you have symptoms and are looking for the answer, then get the genetic test for confirmation. But I mean, if I had been deselected at birth, I'd be pretty upset. I had a wonderful life.
Yeah.
And you know, so I mean, mine is late onset, so, and until we get pre-existing conditions out of our insurance,
Yes.
that is a major issue. Why would you want to know? We have no cures, we have no treatments. There's no point in knowing, other than to explain your symptoms or
Unless you want to pay off the books, not have it be part of the medical records, it's, you know, and that you can do that, but it's not easy.
well, what
It
is
is
the
hard, though. I
benefit?
know people that have tried to keep it off the records. And
Yeah.
have been fairly successful for a long time. But trying to keep it off the records has as big an impact on you individually as it does on everything else. And the amount of hand-wringing and contortion that you have to twist your life into to hide that fact has a consequence.
That was kind of going to be my question was, can you get the diagnostic testing without it going on your record? I'm 25 and I've been diagnosed based on clinical symptoms alone. I haven't had the genetic testing, so.
So, I think it's probably possible, so, you know, you could pay for the genetic test out of pocket, and then it would be billed to your insurance company. But if you're gonna be seeing a doctor or a genetic counselor to have that done, and, you know, I think it would be difficult to keep it out of the record entirely. But, you know, I've arranged that once for a person who really wanted to make sure it was for a different condition, but to make sure it wasn't in this record and he paid for it out of pocket. But there are protections in place for individuals with genetic disorders. So for individuals who test pre-symptomatically for genetic disorders, so this would be the non-manifesting carriers. So there's something called GINA, which is the Genetic Information Non-Discrimination Act. It was signed into law a couple years ago. And it protects against people who have a genetic test that indicates they are predisposed to develop a disease in the future. For example, you test positive for a gene that puts you at risk for breast cancer. It says that your employers can't fire you or change anything about your job, and your insurance company, health insurance companies can't, you know, drop you or raise your premiums or whatever based on that result. But it doesn't apply to life insurance, long-term care insurance, or disability insurance. And each state, often, a lot of the states have additional protections for some of those. So I believe in the state of Maryland, there's additional protection for long-term care insurance. It varies by state. Once a person is symptomatic, then GINA doesn't apply anymore because you already have the disease. So I know that's a big issue. And what we in the genetics community are hoping is that with the Affordable Care Act, that's going to provide additional protections about pre-existing genetic conditions, pre-existing conditions in general. I'm not a legal expert, by the way. I don't want there to be too many questions about all the nitty-gritty of law because I don't know all that. But that's my job. But yes, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. He was able to get the long-term disability insurance, which we were very surprised because he'd been diagnosed 25 years before that.
Why did they do that?
Anyway, we have a 48-year-old daughter who refuses to be tested because she is so scared that something's going to be on the record. But she shows no signs. So if he had been tested when he was showing signs with the scapula and all that, probably he never would have done the 50-mile hike with the Girl Scouts in 18 hours when he was 40. And
I was tired.
I would be very tired.
There were stations every 10 miles, and most of the participants did not eat. This guy ate a sandwich at every one, at every 10 miles. You know, and was pooped out of his mind. But if he had known and been tested, he never would have attempted it. But he got his braces in '84, 4 years later. In '92, we went to Switzerland with the Girl Scouts because we were cooking. He was climbing the Alps with the AFOs.
Pretty awesome.
So, you know, it
No, they
doesn't
didn't
stop
want
you.
you.
It does not stop you. You just keep on going. Right.
Go ahead, Don.
So I want to start with a comment, then there was another question online. We really are on the vanguard. This conversation is really on the vanguard of what we as a society are going to be dealing with. As I said, I've done 23andMe, which already tests portions of your genome for up to like 250 things now. But we are not far away. We're less than probably a decade away from widespread entire whole genome testing where it will be common for you to have the entire instruction set for your body on a thumb drive available for you and everyone else. So really, I think you should feel a little fortunate that you're having some of these conversations because most people aren't thinking about this at all. And this is our future to go down this path. The question online was about the 30% de novo. And really do you have any thoughts about why that would be so high? Why, that's a lot of people just getting this spontaneous deletions, so to speak.
So repetitive regions of our genome are more prone to these de novo rearrangements or de novo abnormalities. So I think that the hypothesis, which is a good one, is that it's because you have this repetitive segment, these little 3,000 DNA letter repeats a whole bunch of times. And when we have to copy our DNA, literally we have to copy all of our DNA, and that's how you can get changes in the number of the repeats. But 30% de novo is not, it sounds like a big number, but if you look at other dominant conditions, there can be that high, if not higher, of a de novo rate. All of us are mutants, even of those of us without FSH. We all have mutations, right? We all have genetic variation, so nobody should walk around here thinking that they don't have any problem with their DNA, because we all carry genetic changes. Most of the time we don't know about it unless you're going to sequence your genome, or unless the symptoms show up, or unless you have a baby with someone who carries the mutation in the same gene. And genetic mutations happen in every single generation. But again, unless it happens in a gene that's really important, you're not going to know about it.
I just wanted one last bit.
Yeah.
Just point of clarification is that with the PGD testing, usually is it because you're going through this huge hoop to test for FSH, there's a whole other bunch of things that they test for, over 100 things, as I recall, that obviously aren't all the things that we know, but we know that in the case of our daughters and I think to a lesser degree of our sons, but with the PGD with our daughters, we're tested for any predisposition to X, Y, and Z scenario that.
But I don't think that was with the PGD test. I think that was with the CDS that we have to do later.
But with PGD, they usually only can test for one, maybe two things, because you can't check.
With the cells, we did the double check.
Yeah, we did the double
later.
check after. Yeah, that's right. We did.
And
With our son, did it
that's when they
before,
tested.
and then we did the check.
Yeah,
That
because
was-
PGD, they need all the cells just to test for that one thing.
Right. Yes.
And those, and a lot of times, it's there is like newborn screening, and there is genetic testing that does get done in children before they have disease, and those are usually the diseases where there is treatment that you can intervene early and prevent complications further down. If that ever becomes the case for FSH, then this conversation changes dramatically. If there is a treatment that you start them like the day they're born and you prevent them from having downstream complications, then it becomes our responsibility to inform people of their risk and really strongly encourage genetic testing, because we actually can, that would be a scenario where we would make a huge difference in what the outcome is.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.